Okay. I have no idea who this is. Oh no. I'm sorry. Have you seen the speaker? Have you seen Mark Brancato? I had no idea this is coming. I'm not pretending. Hello. Hello. Okay. I am going to hand this off to this guy here. Okay.
Well, thanks for coming. If we could just open up with a word of prayer, that God would deliver his message to us. Thank you, Heavenly Father. It's just being in our lives, Father, and your Holy Spirit just guiding us. And we just ask that you deliver your message, Lord. You've put it upon my heart to do such a thing. And I just pray that the youth, Lord, will receive this message. As most of us adults, at least could recognize your word, but what they face in school and what they face in this world is difficult, Lord. And I pray that they would receive some of this message from you, and they would take your word as truth. So we pray these things in your name, amen. Just a brief description of who I am for those who don't know my background. I majored in science, so this is kind of a hobby of mine over the years. Kind of follow these things. I noticed talking to a lot of you are very interested in the subject and have followed along with this subject, and I've kept up on it, which is great. And hopefully you'll be able to shed that to other people. But going into medicine, I majored in a degree in radiological sciences and nuclear medicine. So this was an interesting topic. More or less, my specialty is more in radiation, but being a science category, you can't help but not want to disprove what they're trying to tell you. So you've heard basic evolutionary steps. And this is kind of, I think, where we're kind of at today. Yeah. I like this one because I have a former Adventist background, so I kind of think that these maybe were my Adventist brothers, if that was true. Most of them are vegetarian. I know there's a couple of vegetarians in your slide. It says early vegetarians returning from the kill. So, and I like this one because this is me right here. I thought it was cool, and then you go in and you're like, oh, what's going on? School of the Gifted there. Just a brief outline. We'll go over some common questions, basic principles of theory, complexity of a living cell. Scientists like to say that the simplest form of life is a bacteria cell. So we'll kind of go over that, and we'll do it quickly. Some things we're going to go over really fast, just so you can understand a concept. Others will slow down. We have some random mutations, some fossils, geology, missing fossils. Everyone likes to hear about those transitional bones, those missing links. Radiometric dating and evidence of a worldwide flood, which is very interesting when you start covering flood issues. So when can science and religion and faith coexist? And the answer is they can coexist as long as it does not contradict the Bible. Very simple. Evil is always opposite of righteousness, as darkness opposes light. I put this in here for you were once darkness. But now you are the light of the Lord. Walk as children of the light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, proving what is acceptable to the Lord. Have no fellowship with unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of these things which are done in them in secret. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. I believe these things are part of the darkness. This is a deception Satan uses to deceive the world. You know, one of his biggest deceptions is just to prove to people he doesn't exist. And the kids are really vulnerable to these things. You know, some of us have been brought up in a Christian life. We don't see it so much. We don't acknowledge it as much. But when you start talking to the youth that is out there, they don't even know. They say, yeah, that sounds good. That's true. You know, it must be true because they put it in the books. Or some funny-looking guy standing up there with spiky hair, giving in a bow tie. No. So, interesting enough, let's take a look at this real quick. This is a biblical account of creation versus the evolutionary. Everything is opposite. Earth before the sun and the stars. You have stars before the earth. Earth covered in water is initially what happened, and then you have earth, molten blob initially. Oceans first, then dry land. Dry land then becomes oceans. Life first created on land. Life started in the oceans. Plants created before the sun. Plants came after the sun. Land animals created after birds. Land animals existed before the birds. Whales before land animals. Land animals before the whales. Everything is opposite. Again, we're talking about macro evolution here. We're not talking about micro evolution. And I don't dispute some of the things about micro, which is we have today. And it's not long-term evolution, but small little adaptations that we get through species that we still see today. Do mutations ever give rise to new purposeful and genetic information? And this is the question, because in order to have evolution, you have to be able to answer this question truthfully. Do these mutations ever give rise? The answer is no. Here's a quote from Ashton. By the way, a lot of my material comes from this gentleman here. He's a doctor, Dr. Ashton. He has a couple books out. And just not to plagiarize any of this stuff, because he's really a great guy and doctor, and has had wonderful works that he inspired and wrote down. So I do have a works cited page. There's about 10 of these after the seminar, if anyone's interested, with other references of things that I use. But he said, mutations always give rise, or it leads to damaged DNA, which usually results in the loss of genetic information. Everything loses, it can transfer, but it does not arise to become built up. You don't get purposeful genetic information, it always breaks down. So you get diseases, loss of limbs, lack of function. We have mutated DNA, which would evolve from one eyes, things like that. Those are all loss of DNA. Evolutionary positions in basic theory is 2.5 billion years ago, roughly, life appeared. It continued to evolve over a long period of time. Structure of geologic or genetic code of living organisms indicates a common primordial origin, big soup. Over time, it increases. And then you have this principle here, which a lot of you, I'm sure, have heard of. In science, the second law of thermodynamics, everything breaks down. You see mountains erode and metals rust, cells die. Scientists don't like to apply this to evolution. Okay, so basic natural selection. Let me flip to it here. You've heard of natural selection. You get more diversified species, and the more you increase, the better chances you have. It's all about chance. Survival of the fittest is another one. Basically, you take Darwin. He observed all these beetles, and he said, there's all this windy side of the island. There's these wingless beetles out of about 550 species. And you take about 200 of them, and they don't have the wings. So that's the reason why that they survived that area, because it's windy and they don't have the wings, so they're not going to get blown off to the sea. That's the concept of survival of the fittest, adapting, so to speak, to that environment. And the tree of life, we came from fossil record that, well, you saw my friend over here this morning, or this afternoon. And life came from a single organism. The question with that is, well, where did the first organism come from? Okay, NASA defines life as a self-sustaining chemical system capable of Darwinism evolution. Now I'm going to quote Liesenfeld. Walking and talking animated earth created and breathed by the Almighty God. I've heard him use that more than one time, so I had to borrow that. Thanks, David. Okay, so the E. coli, the simplest form of life. Now let's just see how simple it really is. Now bear with me, we're going to go over this quick. 2.4 million protein molecules, 4,000 different types of proteins, 255,000 nucleic molecules, 660 different types of nucleic acids, 1.4 million polysaccharides, sugar molecules, 3 different types of polysaccharides, 22 million lipids, 50 to 100 different types of lipids made up of that. So you probably times that by 22. 10 to 30 different types of minerals. Then you have a water balance, which gets complicated. 24.3 billion water molecules. That's a lot of molecules. Non-water components make up about 90% bipolymers. 4,750 different types of complex bipolymers. 800 different simultaneous chemical reactions. And you take a substance called toluene, you add it, it breaches the cell wall, ATP happens, and the cell dies. You just the right balance, and maybe that life would start up again, and the only one that's done that's Christ. We're talking from life, starting life from no life. Now, to be able to do that, there's a mathematician and atheist, Dr. Carl Sagan, and he did some calculations, and this is kind of figurative too, but based on his figures, he said that for those who are really good at math, 1 times 10 to the 2 billionth power is probably the odds it would take from starting from nothing to life, okay? And just to write the number, it would take 6,000 books at 300 pages each. Give you an idea of the chances of that. I think I'd rather take my chances with lotto. So there's 3 ways DNA can be changed. The loss of pre-existing genetic information. This would be like an example of you have a beach, you have mice, you have an owl. The mice have spots. The owls come, they hunt the mice down. The mice adapt, they lose the spots, and all of a sudden they kind of blend in with the sand and they don't get eaten as much. Transfer of new genetic information from one organism to another. This would be an example of antibiotic-resistant salmonella. So if you had virus changes, which you get, and they talk about don't take antibiotics too much because you can get resistant to whatever disease you have. That's why doctors are very adamant about that. And then you have totally new genetic information in the DNA code. This we do not have. Biophysicist Dr. Lee Spencer at Harvard and Johns Hopkins University remarks, this has never been observed. In order for evolution to work, you need new genetic information. Okay, so what are fossils? They're imprints, they're molds of plants, animals, and rock, amber, tar, however they're formed, usually formed underwater. Silica can fill these, and you have this hard substance of something that once was. And just to go over from top to bottom, Nicholas Steno, layers are he pretty much in 1669 developed these layered rocks. He's the one that said that pretty much you could see here, I don't know if you could see the lettering, I know it's pretty small, but that's where you get the Permian, the Mississippian, Devonian, Cambrian. These are ages, okay? The deeper you go, the older it is. So these are layers of rock. Then you have William Smith, another geologist, that said law of faunal succession. And he's basically stating that whatever correlates to this area at level correlates to another area. Oops, go back. And Charles Lyell, he studied some things in the Alps and the uniformitarianism. Kind of remember that word, uniformitarianism. This is basically saying that whatever happened billions of years ago is still happening today. Millions of years ago still happens today. The way the earth wears is the same way all the time. So we can apply it today, yesterday, the day before that. It's always the same. Now just logically, and I kind of want you to think about evolution and creation in forms of logic. You know, if I give my son a bunch of candy, I know logic tells me he's going to be zooming around this room and not too long from now, right? And hard to control. That's logic. I mean, if I say that I drink a lot of water, pretty sure I'm going to have to go to the bathroom soon. Well, it's the same thing with evolution. Certain things don't make sense. And it doesn't make sense that you, especially since we don't remember past so long in history, that the earth is going to wear the same all the time. You see hurricanes come in, you see tornadoes, you see earthquakes. Things change rapidly. Now, how many of you have been to Niagara Falls? A few people, okay. I have. I've seen it from the Canadian side, so that's the better side to see it from. And that little boat there is called the Maids of the Mist. I was on that, right, and it's truly, you could barely see a thing. You're right in the front, and you smell this fresh air, and you can, it's amazing experience, actually. It's very powerful. You get there, and you just, even standing on the top, and you see the top there, it's very powerful. You just hear it, and you just think in awe of what God has done, you know. Well, there was a guy named Charles Lyell. He's a British geologist, and he tried to say, well, he's basically an atheist, and he tried to say that this was not as a result of the flood. You see, Oxford used to teach that the earth was roughly so old and that the flood happened in about 4,500 years ago. During this time, this is when Lyell became more popular, before Oxford changed their views on things. He decided to try to disprove this. So he asked the local inhabitants, well, how fast does this thing erode? Because I don't know if you've heard that Niagara Falls erodes so much, it's a recession rate, per year. He tried to disprove it by saying, well, the locals say it erodes 1 foot per year, and based on that, because it's 35,000 feet long, well, that's got to be 35,000 years. See, the flood doesn't exist. Well, then what happened was, a little bit later, some other people got a little smarter, and they decided to test that theory, and instead of asking the locals, because things change, they found out it was more 4 or 5 feet per year. Well, if you do the calculation, that's closer around 7,000 years. And if you add the fact that there are probably some other events that we don't know what took place in the last few thousand years, 4,500 years doesn't seem that far off. A similar measurement was done in the geologic column on the Grand Canyon. And you notice the layers of rock were calculated by the total thickness of the sedimentary rock. So all those different layers, and they say all these layers, the different years, happen associated with different times, and that's uniform, right, with somewhere across the world. Okay, so what you see in the Grand Canyon is something similar that would happen anywhere else. Now these I kind of put up here just to show you ideas of timelines. Paleozoic era, there's the kind of the oldest ones where we see first form of life, the crustaceans, the sea life. And then you had the dinosaurs, and then you got more present between 65 million years ago was the woolly mammoth till today. So the first one's where you get Cambrian, the second one's where you get Jurassic, you've heard those terms. Almost all fossils have been found in sedimentary rocks formed underwater. This is not disputed, by the way. These rocks are formed all over the world, water deposition occurring everywhere. And I got some great slides for that later. Plants and animals had to be buried rapidly. Fossilization needs catastrophic conditions. So estimated at 98 to 99% of species that once existed are now extinct based on fossil record. What a lot of people have found is a multitude of fossils of different things. You see the dinosaurs that are large. That makes up a very small percentage of fossil record. You're actually getting a lot of plants, you're getting a lot of small animals, and a lot of fossils are records of things we still have today. Animals we still have today, trees we still have today. It's just been reduced. So if you can try to imagine in your mind what happened before the flood and to see what this earth would have been like, I can imagine it would have been a very lush and green place, not a whole lot of deserts. In fact, the Sahara Desert has some things in it that show that. I'll go over that later. So Dr. Andrew Snelling at the University of Sydney describes massive fossil graveyards, sedimentary rock found everywhere under catastrophic conditions. Example of this is the Morrison Formation. It's found in New Mexico. This is a very large place. This is about 580,000 square miles. And there's some Mongolia, South Africa, North Carolina, chalk beds. Chalk beds are as a result of fresh and salt water. It's found everywhere. And we find these in White Cliffs of Dover. We have Ireland, Europe, Turkey, Egypt, Israel, Texas, pretty much all over the world. All over the world, all roughly same areas, same depths. Okay, Dr. William A. Coben is a geologist and paleontologist. He said the deposition of massive chalk deposits across the world corresponds to the time of the greatest flood of the Earth's surface, shows a mixture of fresh water and seawater. Here's another doctor, Dr. Weiss. He basically said these different time periods kind of shows the Ordovician period, right? You can see the different millions of years old. What you have to try to understand is that question right there. How do we have multiple mass extinctions at different times? So if you have, right, remember I was saying about logic. You have 200 million years old, then you jump to another area and you got so many million years old. Where is the multiple mass extinction? We have no evidence of a mass extinction, and I'll go to some pictures later on that about when I showed you the picture of some of the Grand Canyon and some of the rock strata. There's no striations, there's no deviations that show any type of erosion. That picture? Well, I guess, oh, there it goes. Okay. So Mount St. Helens, how many remember? Well, I guess the kids probably wouldn't remember. But I remember that very clearly and got to experience that because it was about 6 hours from that area. Where we lived. My dad's here. So I was young, but I remember you couldn't go outside. You couldn't breathe the air. All this ash was falling. It was like snow, but gray ash, just you'd find in a fireplace. Just chunks of it just falling everywhere. And it looked like a snow-covered ground, only gray. And it was a weird experience. I do remember that. And when this thing exploded, a lot of studies were done. Scientists were this was in our backyard, so we get to really study this and how it's working and what's forming based on it. Well, they found some contradictions. 93 miles an hour, this stuff is traveling, and it's forming strata. Okay, strata is the geological layers that you get build up, right? It's forming strata very quickly. Something that would normally take thousands to millions of years, according to them, is taking, even days. It's building up. 65-foot thick bed of multiple strata. Okay, this is back in 1980. Then in 1982, you had another little eruption, and all the snow that was up top here. This thing's not working. Oh, whatever. So on the top there, that's where the snow is melting, and it caused all these crevices. These are little canyons, and some of those canyons are 140 foot deep, like little miniature Grand Canyons, so to speak. And that happened in just moments. This is not something that took millions of years old. So if you use uniformitarianism to say what happens here happens somewhere else, it doesn't make sense. Here's some other anomalies we'll go over. 3,000 dinosaur footprints ranging from 4 to 32 inches, all facing the same direction. It's like they're kind of running from something. 1997, Dr. Schweitzer, North Carolina State University, found a piece of T-Rex bone which contains detectable red blood cells dated 120 million years at Montana State University. Now, can anyone tell me why this would be a problem? I got some quiz questions here, so I'm ready.
There shouldn't be any.
There shouldn't be what?
Any red blood cells. If at 120 million years, there wouldn't be any detectable red blood cells left.
My orangutan friend wants to give you a gift. So, science says that if it's beyond 20,000 years, it's really not detectable. But these guys were in the millions of years old. No evidence of trilobites, nautiloids, evolving over long periods of time in the Cambrian rocks. These are the trilobites you kind of see. They're actually fairly small, but they're little crustaceans. Charles Bell in the Inyo Mountains of California. Did you know there was 14,000 feet thick of strata containing these things? 14,000 feet. The fossil record shows complexity and diversity of which some animals may still exist today. I'll give you an example of that. The coelacanth fish. That's still here. We get a lot of fossils of that. That's in the Indian Ocean. Starfish, shrimp, lobsters, horseshoe crabs, dragonflies, water bugs, fish. I told you the fossil record is huge, and it's really more than just the dinosaurs. You're missing a whole lot. This is just what's mediaized. But alligators, crocodiles, lizards, turtle, birds, all that. And there's no change. We still have those. An ancient drawing in Utah, just kind of wanted to throw this in there. Little cave drawing. Anyone knows what this is? Oh, man. Okay, now you're going to have 2 minutes. But now someone else is going to have to. Chauncey, you're growing hair by the second, Chauncey. It's a brachiosaurus. At least that's what I would think it was.
Yeah, by the head you can tell.
Here's another one. This is ancient temple in Thailand. Right? See those little things on the temple? That's what it is.
Oh, wow.
Interesting, huh?
Nice. They had some of those in Ireland, too.
Here's Dr. Marwa, anthropologist, found human bones were found in a 100 million year old stratum that shouldn't be there according to the layers of rock. And sometimes what you find, and I have another slide with this in there, but there's a term called overthrusting. And that basically it's an explanation for science to say this bone doesn't relate to this area. So at some point, there was a catastrophic event that shook the ground and everything kind of got changed. Now that's including like Morrison formations and other spots where they found these things to be not consistent. You're talking thousands of miles of overthrusting. I don't know how that happens, but dinosaurs have been found in the same geological strata in New Mexico, Arizona, Mexico, Kentucky, Missouri, Russia, Illinois, Texas, and other locations. In 1982, Dr. Baugh from Texas and other scientists revealed 12 inches of limestone and human and dinosaur prints. You don't see a lot of human bones getting discovered with dinosaur bones. I'll explain why. Many of you have seen this verse. Look at the behemoth which I made along with you and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins, what power in its muscles of its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar. Its sinews of its thighs are like close-knit. Its bones are tubes of bronze. Its limbs like rods of iron. I think he was giving us a little clue of maybe what he saw back then. I kind of think of the Brachiosaurus back here because it's a powerful animal.
Plus that word translated in Daniel was translated dragon.
I've actually heard that too, yeah. So if evolution did exist, this is kind of maybe what would happen today. Well. They've adapted well. And this is the kids. Anyway. A little hunched over there. So the Cambrian rock, we talk about from sea to land and land to air. A lot of people like to say, well, what happened from sea to land? Where's the transition? And from land to air, to birds? Because what we have in the fossil record, we've got a lot of species of the same type. But you don't see a lot of species before that type. You'll see another kind of species. So it's either it's all lizard, or it's all amphibian, or it's all bird. And if there was a evolution of us changing over a period of time, there'd be millions of these fossils. So how do you base all science on one, maybe two fossils? Well, let's talk about a couple of these fossils. So the Cambrian rock. Cambrian rocks, the trilobites. We kind of talked about the shrimp-like creatures. The plant kingdom, flowers that are fully formed in abundance. Turtles, Dr. Roth, a zoologist in Michigan, University of Michigan, she said that turtles should have many intermediates, none are found. Prehistoric leaves. Prehistoric leaves in Oregon from trees that are 30 million years old are similar to modern leaves today. And then this guy right here, this is the Ithiostega. This is the one that a lot of them like to say this has happened from sea to land. The thing about this is very similar to another, and I'm not even sure if I pronounced this right, Euthanopteron. It's fully amphibian. It has fins, bones, no attachments to the backbone, distinct feet and legs, pelvic bones attached to the backbone, different shaped head, and a long tail. This is an amphibian. It's not an intermediate. It's another one. Here's the birds. Archaeopteryx and how do you say that? Thank you. So there's the Archaeopteryx. Fully developed feathers. And the bones of what they found have been very much like that of a bird. So they're light in structure, not heavy like ours. There's no scales being found. But they still call it a transition. It's all bird, but they'll call it a transition. Here's another one. Now, kids question. What is this similar to? The second one there. Ah, yeah, it's very similar to an ostrich. I've got dinosaur gummies. Human and hominid. I think I have Leslie to thank for, oh, yeah. The needs were, what did you say, Leslie? I've evolved over. Yes, and I said you were related to this because you were a hominid. No. Homo sapiens, that's where we're related to, okay, the humans. Erectus, habilis, Australopithecus, and the Ramapithecus. And then there's asparagus and Spartacus and all that other fun stuff. Okay, here's a note. Over 100 years, we've uncovered around 2,000 ancestors, human and ape. No record before the ape, just ape fossils. And we'll kind of go over the major ones they teach in the textbooks. And some of the recent ones that, I think they're all in the textbooks now. So if you take an ape, if you take an ape species, and you erect them upright, and you present it next to a human skeleton, so you can tell which one would be ape on the right. It kind of looks like us a little bit. You know, they're standing up. I mean, I could probably take, I don't know, a dog, for instance, and stand them up like that, and you can try to make a correlation, you know. And this here, well, this is a partial skeleton of Lucy. You've heard Lucy? Okay. Ramapithecus. 5.3 million years old, northern India, was thought to be the first direct ancestor of modern humans. Fossils that were found were upper jaw and some teeth. 1932, these were found. Similar fossils in Europe, Kenya, and the Yunnan province of China. And now is regarded as an ancestor to the orangutan. So they've built a whole structure, a whole skeleton off of a couple things, very small things. And if you've seen some of these things in pictures, you'll see them as erected or maybe with clubs in their hands. But science does say that this is an orangutan. So you have to picture what the media is doing, what science wants to do. A lot of scientists, and Dr. Ashton, in one of his books, he has a book called In 6 Days, he points out 50 scientists that are renowned scientists that are no longer, I think a lot of them are no longer in the positions that they're in. Because there's a certain prestige and there's a certain adhering to that you have to be within that field. Okay? If you're making a name for yourself and you're in a university setting, you're there to uphold the university's ideals. And you're there to speak for the university and its research. So if you're going out doing something that's contradictory to what they're teaching, they not necessarily want anything to do with you anymore. So you will find today that there are very known scientists that believe in this, well, I should say that disbelieve in evolution, not necessarily creation, but they disbelieve in evolution. They know that evolution is false. Some of them, I mean, you get some crazy people that sit there and say aliens brought us here and all this other stuff. But there are many scientists that would agree that evolution is false. Are we talking about Lucy Liu? No. This is one that you teach in textbooks. Maybe we're talking about this Lucy? No. Okay, so that's the partial skeleton of Lucy. That was 3.2 million years old, they said. 1974 is when it was found. Classified as a hominid, only partial skeleton. The brain size, you can see it's 380 to 450 cc's. Does anyone tell me how big a human skull is? Come on. Just a guess.
800.
I have an 800. 900. 650. 600. Go up. 1,200. We'll give it to the. It's roughly between 1250. Got to keep them healthy. 3.5 feet tall. Tooth development. Ear pattern. Long, powerful form. Short hind limbs. Structure in feet. Small brain. Ape-like skull. Jaws in the face. Today it's placed in the family of extinct apes. This is basically a pygmy chimpanzee. Today in the textbook is noted as a transition. Science proves it is a ape. A small one now. Okay, this one you'll hear more about today because the brain size is larger. Now I want you to imagine that something we stated earlier, that if 98% of the world's fossils have been, well, of the world's population, its plant life, its existence of species, have been wiped out, and you only have a small percentage, and the species we have today represents maybe a small percentage of these, but not all. Noah can only take 2. You have to imagine that the ape variety that we have today is what we have. What was could have been 30, 40, 50, 100 more different species. The same thing goes with canine. The same thing could go with dinosaurs. Not everything has to be related to one thing. We've seen multiple species in discovery. This is similar to Lucy, only a partial skull. Scientific community said the skull belonged to a young ape. Here's the Peking man, and this is not the guy peeping through your window. This is Beijing, China, Homo erectus, and classified, found as a group of skulls, jaws, and teeth. Brain is smaller than humans, 10 modern human individuals were also found together. Baboons were used as humans as food in some areas, so it wouldn't be unheard of to find human bones with ape bones. 1941 and 45, the fossils disappeared, and so a lot of it has been contributed as fraud. Maybe this whole thing was just fraudulent. But the Peking man is still in books. Neanderthal man, this is the one where you get with the club and a little hunched over. Found in a cave in Dusseldorf, Germany. Group of skulls, jaws, and teeth. The brain is smaller than humans. Oh, wrong one, excuse me. Portrayed as a semi-erect figure. Neanderthal man was 100 years later, 1970, with vitamin D deficiency. For those of you who are not familiar with vitamin D deficiency, that's rickets. And rickets is, you have osteoporosis, which is different. But vitamin D deficiency is where the development of the bones, especially when they're young, you're going to find a lot of this in third world countries who have malnutrition. And so when you're malnourished and you're as you're growing, you'll have something like this. Okay, now this is one example, but there's deformities in all the bones. But you can see it's because they're getting malnourished, that's the form they're getting. And this is the fossils that are found. So the Neanderthal man is basically a person with rickets. And you have the Nebraska man. This is like one of my favorite ones. I love this one. 1922, from a single tooth. One tooth. We're just going to develop a whole skeleton from one tooth, put some skin and hair on it, and call it a transition. What it was, later discovered, was a wild pig in North America, which species is normally found in Paraguay. So I don't know, maybe the flood kind of took it over. I don't know. So there's the pig with the tooth. Then you have the Piltdown man. 1912. This is where you had a jaw and part of a skull. Come on. There we go. So, the jaw was an ape, that was 1 year old, and the skull was human. About 5,000. So another question for you. Why do we not find more human bones? I think some sharks that disagree with you. He said that there's not many things that eat humans. I said I scuba dive, or have, and I don't know. Looking at those things, they look like. What else? In graves, okay, like caskets or something, is that, or oh, okay. Okay. The reason why you don't find a lot of human bones, you have to estimate human fossils of a lesser populated Earth. Okay, so what we have today, what do they say, about 7, 8 billion people, plus or minus. And then you take this back, 6,000 years ago or so. You estimate maybe 10 million spread uniformly, which I'm not sure it would have been so uniform. It's another thing about archaeology. We're not allowed to dig in certain areas, okay? It's not like I'm going to go to Iran and start digging there. But yet there was a population that was over there. So amongst that area, there could have been a lot of human habitation. But let's say you take 10 million, you spread it over 700 million cubic kilometers. and 1 for every 70 cubic kilometers. So in 2009, an Australian government published that there was about, 1.8 million different species. So we're considerably outnumbered. So 1 for every 70 kilometers, you might find a human skeleton based on the numbers back then. Okay. Can anyone tell me what this is? Also known as what? No, you can't answer because there is a name for this. No. Nope. I'll give you both because he's Tim. Okay. Chart of the nuclides. Chart of the nuclides. So it is a radiometric chart. And there's literally hundreds and hundreds of isotopes. I'll give you a description of what an isotope is. This is now delving into my field. An isotope is something that's radioactive is very unstable. It's excited. You might have extra neutrons or protons or electrons, and they want to achieve a state of neutrality, equilibrium. So because they're excited, they want to become normal, their running speed. I give you the example of a kid with a sugar. He's excited and he wants to run off that energy. That's exactly what an isotope does. It burns off its energy. And in doing so, and it's releasing an electron or one of these things, in the release it causes the radiation. So you see carbon-14 and nitrogen-14. Well, carbon-14 becomes nitrogen-14. So in that excitement state that it is, unstable state, what's funny about unstable, we call it unstable, but it's really stable because it's all holding together. It's not exploding. It's just releasing energy at a given, and this is what, God is awesome in the way he designs things, because he does things so organized. And we have so many different isotopes and so many different types of radiation that do it in different times and all organized, and it doesn't change. So it releases a particle, and then that release of that particle is what gives off, the gamma ray or the X-ray or the beta particle or the alpha particle, whatever it is. And that's where you get your radiation. So an isotope has a half-life. Now half-life, what we use in medicine is we use a lot of different ones, but one of the common ones is called technetium. And it has a half-life of 6 hours. And we use this quite often because it has a lot of energy, which is good for us because we can see it. It's not low. It's not going to sit in your system and interact with your cells. It's going to pass through you. I don't wear lead vests when I go to work like X-ray does because I want that high energy to go through me. I don't want it to sit and intermingle with my cells. So nuclear med, we use a lot of high energy type things. But technetium is high energy. It's about 140 keV, kiloelectron volts. And it has 6 hours half-life. So that means every 6 hours, if I take something that's 10, in 6 hours it becomes 5, and another 6 hours becomes 2.5, and such and such and such. And if you put it in my body, well, my body has a way of getting rid of it even quicker because my body's going to excrete it. If I drink a lot of water, I can urinate it out. I can do other ways it comes out of my system. It really doesn't last me that long. And it's a fairly non-harmful radiation. You don't get that much of it if you get an exam done. But you have tracers that have a parent and a daughter. So you might say that uranium becomes lead or C14 becomes N14. And it's that transition from something excited to non-excited. A daughter, I don't know why they said daughter, not a son. But that's what it does. So you have quantity. The rate of decay must be constant, and rocks must be insulated from outside factors. These are the things that have to stay constant for radiometric dating to work. Does radiometric dating work? Yes, it does in certain things. In other things, it doesn't. If it's more modern and recent, we find that the dating is more accurate. Oh, I didn't. Oh, I guess I missed a picture there. Oh well, I'll just elaborate. So the quantity of radiation has to be enough for us to measure. The rate of decay has to be constant. So I know that technetium, I said it was 6-hour half-life. I know that that's going to decay in 6 hours. It's been proven over many years. That's not going to change. Now there's some recent studies that I've heard and have read about solar flaring. There's a university that talks about solar flaring over the years. When you have a solar flare, it changes the rate of decay, and it can speed up the rate of decay. There's really, I'm not going to dispute it. I'm not going to agree with it or argue it one way or the other. There's not enough study on it to say one way or the other. So we're going to say that the rate of decay, let's say it's constant. We don't know for sure, but in the last couple hundred years that we've really been dealing in tracers, nothing's really changed in the rate of decay. You've had, the quantity does change and insulated from outside factors. So if I take a rock and I put it in a box and I seal it from the environment, I want to say that this rock will never be touched by the environment. No air is going to get inside. No other types of gas is going to go through there. It's not going to be rubbed on. It's not going to be touched. Well, that would be ideal. That would be an ideal measurement, would it not? But that's not the case. We have rocks that are touching other rocks. We have shifting. We have earthquakes. There's so many environmental things that can happen to the geography and the geological layers that can change these things. So they came out with a thing later. It's called, I'm drawing a blank. I'll get to it. But anyway. You can hit the next one. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so it's most widely used in fossils for past living things. That's radiocarbon. There's other types of radiometric dating. It's easily detected since living organisms would intake carbon. You know, carbon dioxide. Everything has carbon in it, so it's easy to detect it. Now, if you say that C14 has a half-life of 5,700 years, plus or minus 30 years, or 40, and it goes to N14. If you take that and you double the half-life, you've got about 11,000 years. Then you got about a quarter left over. So at the bottom there, this is a key component of this. If I'm measuring radioactivity, and I say that that half-life is this, I know that after 50,000 years, this is not detectable. How is this reliable? Isochron dating, that's what I was trying to remember earlier. So that's their more accurate way. They take samples of different areas, and then they plot it on a streamline. So here's other factors. Magnetic field can decrease adding more C14. This would make things older. Volcanoes can add carbon. Isochron dating, give you an idea. Now here's some other types of dating. You have one area that's a Pliocene lava that's 1.6 million years old. And then if I use rubidium strontium dating, it's 770 million years old. If I take some lava here that's 5.9 million years old using potassium argon dating, it's now 31 to 39 using rubidium strontium. And the last one there, the Pliocene Holocene era 5.3 million years old using rubidium strontium dating is 570. Now, when I say stratigraphically, it's because at different layers, we want to say that this is so many million years old, and this depth is so many million years old. So based on geology, I'm going to say because of what we've already decided to plot down, I have to stick with that. It doesn't really match with the radio tracer dating. Follow me? The geology doesn't really match the science. Okay. Yeah, and this is some fun stuff too. You guys know what this is, right? No, that's a Love Boat. Maybe those of you remember the Love Boat. So it says, it's not going to be that kind of cruise, dear. She thinks she's going on that kind of cruise. Okay, so geologists do not contend that our planet was covered with rock strata formed underwater. Pretty much all rock strata had to have been formed under compression of weight and water and mud. Let me go back. The question is whether these different things were done over thousands of years and millions of years, and whether it was done all at once versus 6 different times. Remember the chalk beds I was talking about? So this is an example of chalk beds. You can see the chalking on the outside of these mountains, whether desert or on the sea. And only water causes that. And we find chalk beds everywhere. Morris Information has them. There's, you can see the different levels there. There's the Grand Canyon. It also has examples of different layers, and there's some chalking also found there. But if you look back and you see these layers, right? You've seen those. You've seen rock where they kind of striated this way. You kids seen that? Those are the striations. That's the strata. If you look at that, you'd say, well, how come there's a lack of canyons, gorges, valleys, gullies preserved in the strata? There's no gaps. There's no spaces. There's no evidence of corrosion or erosion signs between the strata. In Texas, the upper Ordovian limestone was 450 million years and overlies its lower Cretaceous strata at 130. So you have older strata on top of newer strata, which they would explain as overthrusting. There's some more examples of 30, 60 miles of overthrusting in National Park. I don't know how you get shifts of all this. It's such a large amount. Now, these are tree trunks that have been preserved in different parts of the world. Antarctica, Australia, there's even some in Spirit Lake. These are tree trunks that are preserved upright. These are fossilized tree trunks. They only fossilize that because you've had a catastrophic event, hit it very hard, and preserved it. Mount St. Helens was a good example. So Spirit Lake is closer to that area. So Mount St. Helens, when it erupted, it preserved a lot of these tree trunks. And we got examples of this also. You can see here, this is preserved in the rock. So that one on the right, that's a tree trunk that's fossil, preserved upright. That's not, and I believe that one there is not from the volcano. So you have, here's some other evidence. Ancient river channels found under sands of the Sahara Desert as large as the Nile River Valley, together with fossils of animals, crocodiles, hippos, evidence of human habitation, fish hooks, and harpoons. Lakes were much larger. Crustaceans at 12,000 feet up. How do you get crustaceans at 12,000 feet above sea level? Hippopotamus found in England, which should have been in Africa. Moose deer in America, found in Ireland. So you got all this shifting around that doesn't really make sense. Here's a whale skeleton that was found 3,000 feet up. There you can see the fossil there. Pillow lava, which is normally formed underwater, is found 15,000 feet on Mount Ararat. That's an example of pillow lava underwater. And then you have stories from all over the world. Ancient stories. So here's some, the Epic of Gilgamesh. We'll cover some of these so you can get an idea of what they're talking about. So the Epic of Gilgamesh was a Samaritan narrative. It's 19th century BC. Gods decided to send a flood to destroy the human race, but King Zevsudra is saved in a giant ship. Greek literature. You have Zeus decides to destroy a human race, but King, let's see if I say this right, Deucalion, advised by his father Prometheus to build an ark. Rains came and flooded the land. And for 9 days, the ark rested on the mountain. So I could picture these pagan, these countries that served other gods and did other things, but they still had some of these basic stories to tell that all related to Noah and the flood. The Roman version had a very similar thing as the Greek one. India, you had the flood destroying mankind. The Mandi people of Mali and West Africa, you had a myth about an ark that landed on a mountain. Then you have stories from China, South Asia, Sumatra, Australia, Borneo, Guinea, Polynesia, Melanesia, South America, Russian folklore, Romania, Lithuania. These all have a saving vessel and a remnant group. And the Chinese have a pictogram. So you see that right there? That's a pictogram of, I'm going to go Chinese for just a minute here. That's Fuzi and Nuwa. So that's basically Noah, and Nuwa was they called it the sister. And then they returned to the Kunlun mountain where they prayed for a sign, an emperor of heaven. And the rest of the story about a saving ship. So there is an satellite view. There's a guy named Ron Wyatt that I've kind of followed over the last few years. And he's gone now. But his studies have been noted by many people. And you can go on the Ron Wyatt Museum. I think it's ronwyatt.org. You can look at a lot of the things that they've actually discovered back in the 70s. And this was back then in the 70s. They found the discovery of the ark. And I believe it to be real based on some of the things that he discovered back then. So you can see the outline. And this was in Turkey, by the way. So you had Mount Ararat. And what they thought happened is because over the years of time with snow and whatnot and just changes, it slid down the mountain and did things like that. So fairly close by. But you can see on the sides there with the arrows, those are the timbers. Go to the next slide there. So there's Ron Wyatt on the left, and he's with some people of the local area. And he's in the picture, is an anchor stone. And the anchor stones were noted to be stones that they would put on the front and on the back of the ship, and that was a counterbalance. So it would keep it from rocking too much. And then you had the stones obviously anchored to anchor down. The stone next to it, well, that's basically petrified wood. That's a deck timber. And then right there is a rivet. So they actually Noah had capability of doing rivets, metal work. If you go back, the dimensions of this ship that was actually found is the exact dimensions of what the Bible tells you. It's been measured, width, height, from what they found with the deck timbers, and length. And it all equals what God said. Let's see. Here's another view of it. You can see the third one down there, those little striations, those are the deck timbers. And samples of those have been sent in, so it is like a fossilized deck timber, you can see. They actually built a visitor center near there, and then the government shut down for visiting. I don't know what the politics were, but I believe currently people are not allowed in that area. And then my last quiz question, can anyone tell me what this is? I was kind of hoping that you might know this. Perfect. Wow. Very good, man.
I'll take a banana. Oh, you can have that.
Oh, you want the banana?
Yeah, give me
It's not organic.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, geez. Want the gummies? Oh. Wait, who didn't get a gummy?
Just free food.
Good catch. Okay, all I got left is bananas. So has anybody got any questions? 'Cause I actually finished, on time. I didn't think I'd finish on time.
Now, I've followed the Ron Wyatt on the Noah's Ark before, and I've also, I don't know if you followed Bob Carnuk's work on that.
On which one?
Bob Carnuk on the Noah's Ark one. I don't know if you remember Armstrong, the one who had this whole thing on In Search of Noah's Ark.
I'm not familiar with it.
The couple of issues I had with Ron Wyatt's on the Ark was one, the word Ark in Hebrew means box. In which case it would have been a box. It would have like the Ark of the Covenant was a box. And when he made it didn't have to steer, it didn't need a rudder, it didn't need a sail, it just had to float. shape of the ship being like that. It needed to be a box to be an ark. The Hebrew word ark means box. That's what it means.
There's a ton of information
Yeah.
on pretty much all these different categories that we went over today. So I do have a works cited page for those who want to, if anyone's interested in doing research on their own, they can borrow from this, not a problem. I would highly recommend getting Dr. Ashton's book, Evolution Impossible. That's a great book. And go ahead.
Mark, do you have, since you've taken such a deep dive in this, do you have like a little cheat sheet of maybe 5 key questions or 5 key data points that, the layperson can quote to basically, put down the evolutionists? Because you'll just hear, well, it's been proven, evolution's been proven to be fact, and there's all this evidence, but having
I don't.
talking points would be nice for the average person.
I think what people try to, the most stuff you hear about is dating. You hear the radiometric dating, which you kind of went over, and the transition bones. What about Lucy? What about, Afarensis africanus and all this? What about this skull they found? That's pretty much what you hear. Fossil evidence and radiometric dating. Those are the 2 most popular I've come across. And this information is really not, it's brought to you guys for the Christian. It's hard to present this information to the renowned scientists because they're going to debunk it all day long. I've been there and done that with scientists and teachers. And it's very hard to dispute. They're very convicted of it. I mean, I think God convicts, but for those who are on the edge that don't really know, that just have heard, especially our students, this is great information for them. So that would be great. I don't know, maybe I'll entertain putting something like that together.
The calcium argon dating that if the rock's been exposed to any intense heat, it will give off millions of years, even if it's been a short period of time, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
You've got a lot of variables with radiometric dating, and I would try to keep that as simple as possible. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I would like to make an announcement. Scott and I and families went to a Museum of Creation down near San Diego a few years ago.
Institute for Creation Research.
Right, now they're headquartered in Dallas. I'm not sure the museum is still there or not.
They have a website, I think. Yeah.
They have a website. Now, the reason I announce this is that I'm a retired teacher of elementary, and for the last 10 or so years that I taught, I actually taught in the public schools, creation versus evolution. And nobody stopped me. And parents loved it, kids ate it up. Of course, my theme was dinosaurs. But the point I'm trying to make is 2. Mainly, even if you don't homeschool, our children are taught
Yeah.
preschool all the way up, and it's ingrained to their mind about evolution. So we need to ingrain in their mind about our God, our Creator. And they have materials from kindergarten all the way through graduate school. They have material, they have books, coloring books, videos, they have a plethora. If you get their catalog, it may be online. I don't go on the internet.
You can virtually find most of the stuff. I mean, there's
Institute of
everywhere.
Creation Research. If you look that up, you will get a huge amount of information on all areas. And acts and facts. It'll show it. There's a magazine, not thick, real thin, but it gives you ammunition to combat evolution for Christians. And the price is free. We get it free. And it may even be posted on the
I thought there's still an institute in Santee. I haven't been down there in a while, but
The headquarters is in Dallas. They may still have.
I think there's one still done. I think it is, but
And also on my website, under websites, there's a link to Dr. Henry Morrison, John Morrison, Mysteries of Creation Science. Plus, there's a link to Dennis Peterson's Mysteries of Creation besides.
oh, okay. Leslie, you had your hand up. That's basically true, yeah. Well, that's true. That's why I say it's very biased, because you got to remember that when you radiocarbon date, you also have to try to correlate that with the geological layer. So if the layer says that it's in 550 million years old, but your carbon dating says that it's 50 million years old, we'll just add a few zeros to make that correlated to the area, because it doesn't, to them, it doesn't make sense that you have, dinosaur bones that should be in that 550 category now in the 50,000.
Now, isn't that correct on carbon-14 dating, that the measurement of the carbon deterioration is from the point of death?
That's what they, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because, like, I know they found a trilobite off the coast of Australia. They dirtied it up, had it dated. It had only been dead three days.
Yeah.
And they dated it as 1 million years old.
So carbon dating is not, actually it's just a very, it's a poor way of representing things that are older than probably 1,000 years old or more. It's hard to use it.
And I think they recognize that it's an inaccurate form of dating.
A lot of scientists do. And they use other dating. So if you remember the other radiometric dating we used up there, or that we saw, so they'll pick the one that will work for the timeline that they're kind of going for.
What I do is I try to focus on the dating methods that are non-radiometric. The lunar dust theory, how far the Earth moves from the sun every year, how far the moon moves from the Earth every year.
I forgot to show you this, the kids this. I completely forgot about it. You know what that's called?
Is that a carbon detector?
Sort of.
It's an intelligence detector.
It's not going off, I'm sorry. Yeah, come on. Who knows what it's called? Geiger counter. Did you? Okay. And this is this here is called a pancake probe, and this is really to detect low levels of radiation. Yeah, I had to change the setting when I got close to these guys. Yeah, so